right, I'm sitting here at Metazoa Brewing. I got Nick and Rob, both brewers here at Metazoa. Thanks for doing this, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no
How you been? Super Bowl hangovers, any?
Bed by 8:30.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Well, again, I love sitting down with the brewers behind the operations because you get to learn a lot more about the beer and whatnot. And for those that may be unfamiliar with the Metazoa story, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving everybody that may not know or be aware of you kind of the origin story of how Metazoa came about.
Sure. So we've been open since April 1st, 2016. Our owner, Dave Worthington, started this brewery. He's started several businesses throughout his life. He started this brewery pretty much with the focus of raising money for animal organizations. So the vessel is beer. We make the beer. Obviously, we're a brewery, but the reason that we do all of this is to raise money for the animal organizations. So that was, almost 6 years ago. Since then, we've kind of just been chugging along in our tap room and dog park, and then get a little bit into distribution. And it's been a lot of growth in the last 6 years.
Well, that's one of the things I've loved when I've come here before is the amount of dogs that are always in here, man. It's an extremely pet-friendly place, and that's exciting to see. Of course, I have a crazy pit bull, so she doesn't do well with others. We're trying to curb that, but she's getting better. But that aesthetic of trying to serve, I mean, how much have you guys raised for some of the pet organizations that you work with?
We have raised over $150,000. I don't know the exact number. I know right at the end of 19 we hit 100,000, and then this past year we did about 50. I don't know what we did in 2020.
We
can't
just
imagine it was a whole lot.
We just threw that year out. Well, that's fantastic. Well, one of the things I love about the craft brew universe is the creativity, and that's emblematic in the names of all the beers. And my go-to with you guys is Hopopotamus, but I've had Nap in a Hammock and a few of the others there. Do you guys have a process for how you come up with the names of the beer?
Yeah, we have a pretty good built-in process for that, with being very obviously pet-friendly and animal-focused. It's a lot of animal puns.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a couple beers that are named after like people's pets, employee pets, and you mostly just really goofy spins on animal names, or some of them are just animal names. So we have a pretty easy built-in sort of program there, which is nice because it can be a giant pain to name beers.
I could see that. Especially talking with you guys on the brewery side, everybody kind of has the first craft beer that hooked them. Mine was Fat Tire. I had Fat Tire in college when I transitioned from just drinking the lightest and the cheapest thing to then having my palate expand. What was the first craft beer that hooked you guys and said, hey, maybe beer's going to be more part of my life than I originally thought?
I would say the first ones that really got me were probably Guinness would have been kind of the first thing. I turned 21. I was living in Ireland at the time. So Guinness, in the west of Ireland, there's a brewery that makes a beer called Galway Hooker. They're based in Galway, and it's like essentially it's a European version of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, a beer that I had not had at that point.
Sure.
And then when I came back to the U.S., the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and everything. And it just goes on from there to all the heavy hitters,
right.
All your Russian River stuff, your Firestone Walker stuff, pretty much all the big guys. But it all started with the Irish beers for me.
How about you, Rob?
Yeah, I would say one of the first craft beers that I ever had was Stone Arrogant Bastard, which I despised when I was 25. Sure, I was 21. We'll say I was 21. But I was living out in Washington State. But it just opened my eyes to like, oh, this is beer. Like, this is not beer. This is not like what I had known beer was. So I didn't really enjoy that experience, but the original Ram Brewery is out there in Lakewood, Washington, which was about 20 minutes from where I was at. So we used to go there with some friends and have dinner, watch games, and drink some beer. So that's really where I sort of cut my teeth first, was on their blonde ale and their porter, sort of two opposite ends of the spectrum of what they did. And then, so that was really where I cut my teeth. And then, sort of Sierra Nevada Pale was really the beer that was like, oh, okay, like this is what we're talking about here. So yeah, and then that's the rest is history, I suppose.
Fantastic. It's when I look at around what you guys have set up here, is there any other breweries around the state, or maybe your experience in Ireland that kind of helped aid in the aesthetic of what you guys were trying to create here at Metazoa?
There are a lot of influences. Neither of us were on board when it was all being set up, but I've heard plenty of stories, and I think most of the influence comes from Asheville, North Carolina. And our owner loves Asheville, and he'll talk about like the garage doors, like all over the place. We're influenced by X Brewery in Asheville, and the the tables. The idea for we have like bowling alley slat tables that came from another brewery there. So I think it was just he loves to travel and go to different breweries, and I feel like when you go to 250 breweries or something, you just pull a little bit from each one and then create something that is yourself.
Very good. Well, you mentioned Rob. What if you had to drink any other beer from Indiana other than your own? What brewery do you guys like? If you name a couple outside of what you guys create here that you enjoy.
Yeah, we have several really awesome breweries. I'll stick to a handful. But really where I would say I spend the most of my money and that I spend the most time drinking outside of here would be Sun King and Daredevil are the two main breweries. I love Chili Water. I would say Moontown has done some really great stuff. Taxman, they're doing some like really world-class Belgian beers, specifically their darker beers. And so I don't drink a ton of their beer, but like the amount of respect that I have for what they're doing there is great. So so those are my main kind of spots that I enjoy drinking.
Yeah, the same. And Beer Brewery, I think, belongs on that list as well. And then shout out to Gugman House, the newest brewery in Indianapolis, I believe, still at this point. And they're just really knocking it out of the park over there.
It's been interesting. When I sat down with Dave Cold and then I sat down with the guys at Triton, it's like they were kind of some of the early craft brewer starters here in Indiana. Yeah. I think Dave told me at Triton when they started, there were maybe like less than 40 breweries, and now there's over 100 approaching 190 here in the state. I often ask any business owner, as growth can be fickle and it could be challenging, it can be awesome. How have you guys managed to kind of the growth of Metazoa since the start here, where you feel good about it, but you're not getting over your skis and feeling comfortable with where you're at growth-wise? Yeah,
it's been a really interesting ride. We started almost exclusively selling out of our tap room, and then by kind of mid 2017, we started to branch out a little bit more. And since then, we've had 3 kind of major expansions in our current tap room, where our original brewery is. That's just adding tanks, adding a canning line, some things like that. And then about 2019, we ran out of space. So now we're in the middle of a much larger expansion, sort of leaning out over the skis a little more, kind of making a bigger investment in the brand and for growth in the future. So we'll be moving all of our production over to another building a couple miles from here, and really leaning into more of a distribution model while still keeping 20 plus beers on tap here and any other tap rooms we end up opening.
Gotcha. You mentioned canning. Did the pandemic kind of push you forward towards that route, or is that a lane that you guys were already starting to go down the path of? Because I've seen your beers more and more around the city and some of the local spots too. So. Yeah,
I think we already owned a canning line at that point, which was pretty lucky. I would say there were a lot of issues with people being able to get cans, being able to get the mobile canners were just couldn't keep up with the demand. But we'd had it for about a year and a half at that point. But yeah, as we just grow, we're just making more beer and more of it's going into cans, so we have more to feed the demand on the market. I don't think we're not hitting the demand at this point, which is not a bad place to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a big part of our growth is just it's really something to be able to get your beer into people's hands, either at a grocery store or liquor store, and have them drink it at home and be sort of front of mind there.
Nice. One of my favorite questions to ask, especially for the brewers behind the operation, is obviously the taps are your successes. Coming from a brewing background and everything you've done or what you're trying, give me a fun story around maybe a failure of something that you tried that just didn't come out, look good on paper, but just was DOA.
How much time do we have? I've had plenty of poor experiences with anywhere from, when you look as like a younger brewer, I had several misses. Sometimes you try to get too cute. I've ruined beers by overly using adjuncts and things like that. That's like the biggest one, and I don't know that I can think of any one specifically. But I mean, I've dumped beer. We've had contaminated batches here, which sometimes is just something that happens. We had some smoke-tainted hops that we had to dump a bunch of beer. So anywhere from recipe design mistakes to process involved mistakes, not here, but prior at prior breweries for me. And then bad luck. I've personally run the gamut of any experience you could imagine
Sure.
of making a horrible beer and having to send it down the drain. We've been in a very good spot here lately. We were just kind of recently talking about it, that it's been a while since we've had a true miss, which just happens. I mean, they will happen again, but even just like from a foundational, like the beer from recipe to, grain to glass, sort of from recipe development all the way through process to pouring it out of the faucet. We're in a pretty good spot right now that I'm sure I just jinxed.
Yeah.
Knock on the wood.
Yep.
Every now and again, you'll get an ingredient that you just think is really going to work. For us, Sabro hops, we kind of went in a little hard on some Sabro hops early on, and it did not work for us. The beers were fine. We didn't dump them or anything, but not what we were looking for. And yeah, we don't use Sabro hops anymore. I'll say that. But it's one of those things you never know until you try something. And
Sure.
a hop that everyone was in love with, Sabro, in 2018, 2019. And when we were finally able to get some, we were super excited, and we overdid it. It's a very characterful hop that can taste like sort of lime flavored pine sol and like coconut cream. It's a really strange hop. And you can definitely overdo. Yeah, overdoing it is the only thing we've done with it.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to find a good balance with that hop.
Understand. Well, follow up. Is there anything that kind of maybe went off the rails, but was kind of an idea forming for something that maybe on your tap room right now?
Not right now, but even Sabro turned itself into. We made a beer called Porky Pineapple that we kind of leaned into that sort of citrusy and coconutty thing, and we added pineapple to an IPA and used up some of our Sabro, and it was extremely popular with people here in the tap room. It's one of those beers that the brewers, we didn't care for it, but it's not about us. So that is a great example of one where even from the bad things, you'll learn something. You can, if you're not learning from every batch of beer, you're just kind of wasting your time.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I sat down with Dave Cole, he's like, we made cream ale. It's kind of like the seasonal, and we were just trying something, and now it's 40% of our revenue.
Yeah.
It wasn't something we were going in thinking like this is going to be one of our staples, but then you get surprised by your audience telling you what they like, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any other ones on your current tap that you felt that way, that maybe your membership here and your patrons told you like you need to have this all the time?
Trash Panda, for sure.
Yeah, Trash Panda.
That's our sort of vanilla latte inspired blonde ale. And yeah, we basically made this as a trial for another beer that we do. And it quickly was, our number one selling taproom beer, and won a gold medal at the Great American Beer Festival last year. And that kind of pushed us. And it's a beer that we enjoy. It's a tasty beer. It's really pleasant. It was something that we knew that we were going to brew again after we tried it the first time, but it has taken off so much that we cannot take it off tap. And it will be it will be a permanent fixture in the draft wall at Metazoa.
That's kind of like business 101, right? It's listen to your customer. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Especially when they tell you something's great. Is there any trends in the industry that you guys are seeing that you want to try? Like, we're starting to see sours a lot more. We're starting to see obviously a lot of the bourbon barrel stuff that Dave
Sure.
doing at Taxman and some of the other things. Is there any trends that you guys see that are beneficial that you guys are going to attempt here in the coming year?
Yeah, lager is the big thing that we're leaning into. As I mentioned our expansion earlier, a big part of that is we're setting ourselves up to make lager the way they do in Europe, in Germany and in Czechia. So we'll be decoction mashing, we'll horizontal lagering tanks, kind of the whole thing. So we're going in fairly hard on this trend. Lager is not the most risky thing. Everyone drinks lager. It's just a matter of we need to make one that's interesting enough for our customers and for the general public to really lean into. But I'd say that's our biggest not gamble even, but it's the one trend that we're seeing craft lager grow a little bit, and we're wanting to kind of grab that pretty hard here in our local scene at least.
Understood. In my day-to-day, I'm a financial advisor, wealth planner, and finance guy. And, when I sit down with prospects for the first time, I just try to come from a foundational base of education, guidance, and counseling. And, I just try to educate them that there's essentially 4 challenges to creating wealth. As it pertains to your business here, centered around beer, what are some of the challenges that you guys are facing? I get a myriad of different answers, especially coming out of the last 18 months that we did, as opposed to, just being freeform. But what are some of the challenges you guys face that you're looking to overcome here in the coming year?
I mean, it's agricultural product. So this year, barley prices are up 40%, and you just have to absorb it. I mean, you can't make beer without barley. Mm-hmm. So every year, like in 2020, we had smoke-tainted hops from the Pacific Northwest. This year, we had a poor barley harvest in Canada and in the upper Midwest. And the year before that, the hop harvest in Europe was really bad. So it's just one of those things that you can rely on something going. There's too many moving parts in a manufacturing business like this that something will go wrong. Aluminum costs through the roof.
Can shortages.
Lead times for stainless are crazy too.
Obviously, a pandemic. Since we do not offer food here, we have a food truck. But since we're pet friendly, we're not allowed to have our own kitchen, so we don't operate as a restaurant. So during COVID, while other breweries were able to operate if they had food, we were considered breweries and not restaurants, So our doors were completely closed for several months during the pandemic. So that's, it's things like that you don't really think about, but it's like 3 months of lost business during the summer. Now we're still trying to make that up, and we'll never be able to, So, and then also while we're going through expansion and growing, we're going to be, opening a new tap room. We've got a new brewery that we're building out. So I think, while we're trying to feed demand, we can't currently meet the demand that we're seeing from bars and restaurants for our distribution network. And so not trying to get ahead of ourselves there. And again, like you talked about, like getting too over your skis, still like maintaining a responsible level of growth. You've seen over the years, countless breweries overexpand, and they just never are able to make up the money that they spent on expansion. So, trying to do that responsibly is very challenging. And so we're going to be seeing that in the next couple of years for sure. Which is, it's exciting, but again, risky. And
sure.
That's a big, potential pitfall.
Now, you mentioned the new location. Is it going to be downtown here, or is it going to be more north? What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, so we've got our new brewery we'll be building out on Miley Avenue on West Washington, just out past the zoo, sort of like right around the corner from Working Man's Friend is probably the what most people would sort of know that Stringtown area for. So no long-term, no short-term plans for a tap room there, but we did just the Indy Star just spilled the beans on us that we purchased a property up in Fishers at 116th and Allisonville that we will be building a tap room out.
Oh, very nice.
Up there. So that'll be our first big tap room expansion, which we're all very excited about.
That's fantastic. I live up in Noblesville, so very rarely do I make the trek down here, but when I do, I kind of swing through here and go to Indiana City and a few others. But that's exciting. So what's the target date for that to be open? You guys thinking? It'll be open when it's open.
It's a lot right now. So we're building the building. We're doing it all. I think the projection now would be April of 2023. But it's construction, man. So it could be 3 months before that. It could be 9 months after. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, pricing on materials is
even finding the labor to do some of this stuff is difficult right now.
Yep. Is it going to be set up similar to here? Pet friendly, open air, kind of?
Definitely. Yeah, we've learned a couple things that we'll try to fix, but other than that, the model works. It works alarmingly well, allowing people to bring their pets to a place like this. It has worked so well for us that we're not really going to mess with that part of it.
Yeah. That's a good segue. The pet loving community is a very strong, tight knit. As it pertains to the community you guys are trying to foster in here, what does that word mean to you, community?
Yeah, I really enjoy in the afternoons when I'm getting ready to leave and seeing a lot of the same faces at the bar. I like seeing, on the weekends and weeknight events that we have, a lot of returning organizations. And that's the biggest part of our community is the organizations that we work with, and the people at those organizations. Our marketing and event staff and our tap room staff do an excellent job of fostering those relationships. I like to just nudge up to the bar and drink beer with a few regulars. That's my community. That's kind of where my community involvement is with this. But yeah, just it's speaking our brand to people and having them hear that and be receptive to it and keep coming back. I think that's the important thing when you continue to see the same faces. I think that's the community that we're looking to grow in as far as inside of our own four walls.
Beautiful. Anything to add, Nick?
I mean, not a whole lot, but just going back to it's the reason we exist is that community, this animal loving community, whether it's obviously we give a lot of attention to people and their dogs, but we're raising money for zoos and humane societies and animal sanctuaries who rescue animals that were whatever circus animals or animals from show business that no one wants anymore, or old racing dogs, things like that. So it's really just, that's because that's why we exist. Everything else kind of puts itself in place. It's really easy to walk the walk when it's like you don't exist without this community. And that's why I feel like people, we get so many regulars. People connect to it. And I think it's a really great thing to have a business that can do some good and can provide beer and an environment that people connect to in that way. I think it's a really special thing.
Well, I see when you look around, I can see the interesting mug club that you guys got. Give me an idea how the idea of that started.
Again, I think traveling. So the owner, Michigan has a really big mug club culture. So I feel like the idea kind of came from there. There's a couple other breweries around here that do it. Beer, I know, does it.
Yeah, Beer does it.
Books and Brews has been doing theirs for a long time as well.
Big Lug.
Yeah, Big Lug. So it's really just a way to foster regular customers and let them know that they're appreciated. And most of the places have a standardized mug, but we let people kind of bring in their own mug, which is kind of a unique and fun thing. It's a lot of work to kind of maintain it all, but but it's cool to allow people to kind of you see some German Steins and Krugs and things like that are it's pretty cool to see people drinking out of all of that stoneware and stuff.
Very nice. I'll take some pictures of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool.
Fun. Coming from a brewing background and maybe tinkering and home brewing and whatnot, and now coming into an operation that's successful, it's different than you thought it would be, being a brewer for a larger operation than kind of tinkering on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah. So I started as a home brewer. I was a home brewer for 8 years before I started professionally brewing. This is my first professional brewing job. But yeah, it's a different thing. It's mostly, everyone says it, but it's mostly cleaning. It's really the actual, what people think of making beer is, we have 5 full-time staff and one of us spends the day making beer, quote unquote. And so that's 20% of the total time that it takes to make the product is actually making the wort on the brew house. So I think that, it's just cleaning. It's mostly cleaning. That's all there is to it. Cleaning and then just being meticulous with every process to try to improve things, which is the way any good manufacturing plant or food service industry, any business, if you're not pushing to improve those little micro improvements over and over and over, you're not going to be as successful as we've been here. Yeah. So that's the hardest part is there's no stopping. You're just constantly improving. Yeah. And it's a lot.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. A lot of brewers don't come into this thinking that they're going to be in a manufacturing business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they think they're going to be spending more time drinking beer, but just like you said, it's kind of multiple hat wearing, and you're essentially a manufacturer.
Yeah.
Right? So
I think it's important to see it that way.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some art to it, but you can be as artistic as you want, but if you can't put out a consistent product or a good product, or you can't reliably maintain a schedule, then it's just all for naught. At least on the scale we're trying to do it at.
Very good. Last question. One of my favorite questions to ask is this timing of this 3 years. And I think 3 years is a good enough time because you can kind of focus somewhat on the long term, but it's not long enough to where you can't look back. And when I sit down with clients for the first time, I often ask them this question is, over the next 3 years, what do they want to see accomplished? It could be professionally, financially, emotionally, over the next 3 years, that if we sat down again 3 years from now, we can look back on that initial time frame and say we're on the right track for doing things in a successful way. As it pertains to what you guys are trying to create here with Metazoa, if I ask you the same question, 3 years from now, if we sat down for another podcast, what would you want to see or envision for what Metazoa can look like 3 years from now? What would it be?
Lager.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing for us right now, and I think part of that really is going to fall on consumers to trust us when we tell them that they want to drink our lagers. There has been some struggle here in the state of Indiana to really drink craft lager. I mean, we've got a couple of breweries that are making some really great lager. And it doesn't seem to have been able to create a real foothold for that. And that's what we want to do. We want to let people know why it's special, why it's why brewers love lager, and making the leap with some Budweiser drinkers, and connecting those dots for them. If in 3 years we're selling 10% of our beer is lager, that's what we want to do on that front, at least.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. How about you?
I want to see us continue on a sort of growth pace that we're on now. We've, excluding 2020, grown 25 to 35% every year. So I'd love to kind of keep that going for a few more years. But as a brewer, we've recently kind of started focusing on where our ingredients are coming from, and I want us to get better at sort of giving credit to the hop farms that are growing our hops, and talk more about our relationship with Caleb over Sugar Creek Malt, things like that, so we can kind of bring other people up with us. That's one of the great things about what we're doing here is that we can talk. You mentioned that you like Crocodilian, and I know that those hops came from CNC Hop Farm in Moxie, Washington. So as we continue to grow and develop, we can start telling those stories better and giving more credit to different people, and we can help other businesses grow with us as well. And it's just it's a really exciting prospect to be one of the breweries that helps lift others up. I feel like that's a lot of fun to feature that our coffee for Trash Panda comes from Blue Mountain. And just being able to give credit all across the board to everyone who makes what we do possible.
Awesome. Well, Nick, Rob, thank you for your time, man. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Yes,
Make sure you down doing this.
Absolutely.
All right, Metazoa, downtown Indy. Bring your dogs. Pet friendly. Enjoy beer. All right. See you next time.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. For the latest on financial views with local brews, please check out our website at financialviewswithlocalbrews.com. You can also find us on YouTube via our channel there under the same name, Financial Views with Local Brews, as well as follow us on all of our social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, where you can like and connect with us throughout the craft beer universe that we're trying to explore here in the great state of Indiana. As always, cheers. The next round's on me, and I look forward to seeing you for future episodes. Bye, everyone.